In September 2022, in West London, neighbors would call the police after they hadn't heard from their neighbor in a couple of weeks. She had been acting a little strange lately, acting more tired, and she had lost a lot of weight. But that wasn't really why they were calling the police. It was because there was a horrid smell coming from her apartment. And to make it even worse, there were maggots crawling from under her apartment door. So they would call the police, and their biggest fear would become reality when the police would enter into Shakira's apartment, only to find her decomposing body laying on a bed. This 35-year-old woman, who was extremely healthy, was beat so bad that it didn't look like an accident. This wasn't a woman who couldn't take care of herself. She went from a size 16 to a size 6, and it was clear that she had been starved and tortured. And this is the case of Shakira Spencer. Let me introduce you to the decomposing flower. I'm your host, Jen. With me is Kira. If you're new here, we talk about all sorts of things that are kind of true crime adjacent. This episode is going to have some heavy themes. We are going to be talking about abuse, torture, murder, mentions of drugs. So if that is something that you're not really in the headspace for, you can check out some of our other episodes. They're not all dark, so take care of yourself, and we'll see you in another episode. Before we begin, let's talk about who Shakira was. Now, I'll be honest, there wasn't a whole lot of information on her, but what I do have is that she was this super happy girl. Shakira was born on June 13th, 1987, to two adoring parents, Lloyd and Mira. Shakira grew up in West London and had this big, loving family. They loved to host a lot of parties, whether it was birthday parties or weddings or holidays or just having a family barbecue. They were that family. Shakira was super kind, loving, bubbly. She just was this happy person. She was shy and quiet, but she was kind of the girl that would come out of her shell when she was around her friends or her family. Unfortunately for Shakira, growing up, she didn't really have it that easy. She did have a learning disability, and she was a little bit socially delayed. So, of course, kids being kids, they would pick on her. She just was a lot more vulnerable than your average person. She was a people pleaser, and she was the kind of person where she would always put everyone's needs over hers, and she kind of wanted just to make people happy, even if that was going to hurt her. She trusted very easy. She kind of was that person, I think, that couldn't pick up on social cues. You know those types of students or like kids where you can tell they're being bullied by their friend group, but they don't even realize it? That's kind of the way Shakira was, or how she kind of came across in my research. So, one thing about Shakira is that she really wanted to become a mom, to the point that when she graduated high school, she would end up working in a nursery, and her family thought that this was actually going to turn her off from wanting kids because you're surrounded by a bunch of screaming babies. But actually, this made her want kids even more. So she ended up having two sons of her own. And according to her family, this is when Shakira truly blossomed and became so happy. She just loved being a mom. She loved doing the mundane things, just waking your kids up, getting them dressed, making them a little lunch before they go to school. She just really loved that. Now, from what I know is that Shakira did have a partner, but they did end up splitting up a little bit before this case happened. And I don't know if that partner was her son's dad or if this was someone else. There really wasn't a whole lot of information regarding her kids or her partners. So unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot on that. There really wasn't a whole lot on Shakira either, which I usually hate because I like to really honor the victims. Pretty much all we had is that she just was this loving, bubbly, kind person who loved her sons. She was living independently. She just was living her life. Shakira's biggest mistake is probably the most human mistake, and that is trusting people. She wanted friends, she wanted to be loved, and because of that, she trusted too easily. This is kind of common for people who have learning disabilities or are cognitively delayed. Sometimes they don't pick up on social cues or they just trust a lot more easy because they might just have a more of a vulnerable mind. And sometimes they don't see that people are truly vile. And Shakira was very easy to manipulate. And I think it's because she just wanted to be liked. She wanted to have someone love her back. And she just wanted friends. And I mean, who doesn't want friends? Her life would change in 2014 when she would meet a woman named Oshana. She was a woman who was just a couple years older than her. She had her own kids and she lived in the same neighborhood and they just became friends. But unfortunately, this woman would destroy her life. Oshana definitely was not a great person. She had a lot of issues. She had a huge criminal history. She was considered to be a bully and just pick on people who were younger than her and who were more vulnerable than her. This friendship, I think, started off maybe normal, hanging out, doing whatever. In 2017, Oshana would introduce Shakira to her friend group. So there was Sean, who was her boyfriend, and they actually had an interesting age gap. Sean was 26 and Oshana was 37. And then there was Lisa, who was 44. And then, of course, Shakira was 35. So this, like, friend group was definitely, like, a little bit all over the place with the ages. But these people were not good people, especially to Shakira. They were considered sadists by the court. They are kind of like your stereotypical bad group of people. I don't know if anyone else took DARE in middle school or elementary school. Maybe you had like a police officer come in and talk to you about drugs and they would tell you about stay away from groups of people that are going to peer pressure you into drugs and you know how it's usually like very stereotypical and like growing up you don't really experience that. Well, these people were pretty much that group. They just were not great people. For example, Oshana had been in prison multiple times. She apparently attacked a woman and was like beating her in her back in the middle of the street. She neglected her children. She was in and out of prison. And then Lisa was known by neighbors to be running a crack house. People were in and out of her house all the time. And then Sean was arrested for selling heroin and crack. So definitely not the best influence on Shakira. It started off with Oshana inviting Shakira out to drink and hang out with this friend group. I don't know exactly if Shakira drank before or if she was a social drinker or if she just never drank before. I also don't know how they got her into drugs. There really wasn't a whole lot on that. But I mean, it could have been as simple as them being like, hey, do you want to do this? And Shakira wanting to make people happy or not really understanding what these drugs will do. And these drugs, obviously, they changed her from this bubbly, happy girl to this shell of a person, all because she just wanted to fit in. And it's just so sad to think about how these people had more power over Shakira. And I don't want to make Shakira come across like she was weak for doing this. Obviously, I think she just wanted to be loved. She wanted to fit in. And Oshana knew that. And Shakira, like I said, was so easy to manipulate, and she's just the best target for that. Nearly 90% of people with disabilities will be abused or bullied or hate crimed in their life. And it's just so awful to think about that. So the drugs would change Shakira's life, like I said. She wasn't this happy person, she wasn't bubbly, and she started to isolate herself from her family. And when Shakira's relationship ended, that is when she got a lot closer to Oshana and the rest of the group. So in 2021 is kind of when things started to really change. Shakira wasn't very active in communicating with her family. She wasn't answering calls anymore. She ended up disconnecting her phone. She was just using a landline. She wasn't answering messages on Facebook or getting in contact with anyone. So Shakira's sister, Irina, she knew that Shakira was very busy with life and that she had these sons. And it also is kind of COVID time, right? She kind of just assumed, like, we'll see each other soon, eventually. But Irina actually had a daughter, and she wanted Shakira to meet her. And the one sad thing about this little girl actually had a heart condition. And so I think Irina just wanted Shakira to be there for her and also just to meet her niece. So they actually set up a time to meet, but it fell through because Irina's daughter had to go to the hospital. And so during this time, they're probably not thinking, oh, let's meet up because her daughter has a heart condition. She can't be traveling a lot. And obviously, she's probably going to be putting her daughter first. But also, this is COVID times. It really isn't that easy to make plans back then, if y'all remember. And so when things really started to change, though, was in 2022. In early 2022, Irina actually calls Shakira, and Shakira seems really off. And that's when Shakira would give her the sad news that she lost custody of her two sons, that they were now living full time with their dad. And this was a huge shock to the entire family because Shakira was a good mom. She loved her kids. She took pride in being a mom. And this just wasn't like Shakira. And so Irina's thinking, what are you talking about? But she didn't really want to talk about it to her just on the phone. She felt like this was a more in-person kind of conversation. And so they were supposed to meet up, but they never did. But to everyone, this was the moment when they started to really feel like things were changing. Because, like, what do you mean you lost custody of your kids? So Irina would invite Shakira to her daughter's birthday, and Shakira just didn't show up. And that's kind of when the family was like, okay, something is going wrong. So Lloyd, Shakira's dad, he would actually go and visit Shakira at her apartment, but she was acting very weird. One, she wouldn't really let him up into her apartment, and she wasn't that kind of person. She just wanted to kind of talk in the entrance, and he thought that was really weird. She was also incredibly skinny. She went from this healthy size to just looked like she hadn't been fed. He didn't really know what was going on. It wasn't just she's losing weight. It's like she's rapidly losing weight. And she just seemed depressed. And then she would share some heartbreaking news. She would say, I feel unloved, which of course broke her dad's heart because he's looking at her like, why would you think that? That's why I'm here. I love you. We all love you. Why can't you see that? And Shakira just couldn't. So Lloyd would actually ask Shakira, why don't you spend your birthday with us? Maybe we can try and help you. And Shakira would say she would think about it, but that would never happen. Shakira was actively being abused and tortured during this time period. I think for the past couple years she had been, but in 2022, it just amped up. Oshana was, first of all, cashing in Shakira's benefits and her checks, which I doubt was a lot of money because we all know that people on disability, they're not banking in a lot of money. They were forcing her to do a lot of errands early in the morning and also late at night. And I don't even know what kind of errands they would be. Like whether it was going to the shop, it's picking up drugs, who knows. They were treating her like she was their servant, forcing her to do things she didn't want to do, cleaning up after them, making dinner. They actually starved her, only feeding her little packets of ketchup. You know, when you go to McDonald's and you get that, that's all she's eating. They would beat her, insult her, and they just broke her down to the point where she didn't even question it. I'm sure that maybe there was a way where she could have possibly gotten help or leave, but she clearly was so broken to the point that maybe she didn't think she could leave, or maybe she didn't know how to leave, or maybe they were threatening her, saying if she leaves, they'll do something to her. It just was awful. They would also force Shakira into sex work, basically pimping her out, and then they would just cash in her checks and do whatever with that money. Sean was also sleeping in her apartment and then forcing Shakira to sleep in a bike shed, which is so awful, which kind of makes sense why her kids most likely were taken out because I'm assuming maybe the drug usage, they saw that, although nobody really knows exactly what happened then. Every time they would beat Shakira or insult her, they would film it, and they also would invite other people in to join in. I don't know if that was forcing people to beat her or rape her, I'm not sure, but I just think that's so fucking disgusting. Nobody knew this was happening to Shakira. Nobody knew that she was being tortured. And sometime between September 9th and the 12th, this trio would abuse and beat Shakira basically to death. She was tortured in the kitchen, beat, kicked, slapped, punched. Sean would force Shakira to kneel, where he would then hit her on the head with a glass bottle. And they fucking circled her as she begged and pleaded for them to stop, like they were just a sick pack of wolves. And the reason we know this is because this was done in front of 2 children. These were not Shakira's kids, I believe they were Oshana's kids. They were 10 and 12. They were referred as Child A and Child B, obviously for their protection. They were doing this in front of children, and they didn't care, which I don't even know what they were doing to those children as well, if they're willingly doing this in front of them. Child A, who was 12 years old, had said that they watched the torture and the abuse towards Shakira. They would watch as Shakira would beg and cry and scream, wanting it to end. This child would say that it made him fucking sick. When they stopped doing it for a little bit, it was only because they were hungry. They would literally pause and have dinner as if they're playing Mario Kart, being like, oh, mom wants to have dinner. Let's pause this right now. They would eat dinner and then they would go right back to the kitchen and just go back at abusing Shakira. They ordered Child A to start a kettle where then they forced Shakira to strip. And Oshana was filming this the entire time, where they then poured the boiling water and scalding Shakira. Shakira was crying, screaming in pain, and then they went even further. They blowtorched her. They literally made a little DIY kit. Oshana used a can of spray and lighter and burned her. And she only stopped because it hurt her thumb. Then she handed it to Sean and told him to continue it. And he did. Shakira's body could not handle this and she gave out. She fell and hit her head really hard. And then they just dragged her under a newspaper in her own urine and dragged her into the hallway and just left her there. And they stomped on Shakira's head in front of these children. I cannot imagine what those kids saw and how they'll cope. They had drawings from Child B, who was 10. These drawings showcased Oshana with an angry face beating Shakira with a sad face. They drew marks all over Shakira to show where she was beat. They even showed saliva dripping out of her mouth. They also drew Sean and Lisa beating her. And this child would even say they were squishing her face like a banana when they were stomping on her head, because that's the only fucking way a child can comprehend what is happening. It is so deplorable. This child would say that the last time he saw her, she was incoherent, crying, and he just said it made him so upset. I hope those children they have therapy. I hope that they have been able to get some form of coping, because I don't even know how you unpack that at that age. Thing I always find so interesting with these cases, it's almost like these perpetrators think that they can just do this forever and that the human body won't give out. Because eventually the body can't take anymore and it just dies. It's just, these people are so dumb. Like, literally, these dumb fucking idiots. Literally. On September 12th, this was the last day Shakira was ever seen. Because she was pretty much so tortured and on the brink of death, they would have to drag her into the boot of a car, where they drove her to her apartment, brought her inside, and locked her in a cupboard that was kind of like a pantry cupboard. And they also went through a lot to conceal her death and her body. They placed incense around her to hide the smell, and they even placed ice all around her body to probably slow the process, I'm assuming. And days prior, there would be footage of the trio buying cleaning supplies with Shakira's bank card, and Oshana was caught yelling, "I can't go back to prison," which is like, you should have thought of that before you beat and tortured someone. They would actually go back a week later, multiple times actually, and they would drag her body and place it on her son's bunk bed. It's actually unsure if Shakira was even alive at this point, but I assume that she had already died. Sean would try to claim that he stopped by multiple times, visiting Shakira, bringing her soup, which is so stupid because it's like, oh, are we supposed to look at you and be like, wow, you brought her soup, even though you beat her, you tortured her, and you didn't call any medical help for her? Like, you're not a hero for that, even if you did bring her soup, which I doubt he did. And then they just went on with their lives. So it wasn't until 2 weeks later on September 25th when neighbors noted that they hadn't seen Shakira in a really long while, and the last time they saw her, she was stumbling a lot, she was struggling, and the neighbors were really worried, but when they could smell something coming from her apartment and there were maggots crawling under her door, that's when they would call the police. They wanted to do a welfare check because, maybe something happened. Because sometimes people are just living in their filth, but I think they just had that feeling they knew something was wrong. When the police would arrive, they would try to get Shakira to answer the door, but of course she's not, so they would have to force their way into her home. They would then have to go into her son's bedroom where they found Shakira on the bottom bunk. What's so sad is this room was still set up the way it was left, as if she still had her kids. Like, she still wanted her sons back, and she's just dead, beat severely. What's awful is the police could tell that somebody had been in here. There was food everywhere and dishes like on the stove, as if somebody was in her home cooking dinner. So they could tell like Shakira didn't just die of a natural cause. She was clearly tortured and somebody was in her home just living it up. And even though they most likely knew this was Shakira Spencer, they needed to identify her because she had such horrific injuries that they couldn't actually tell what truly killed her. She had 6 injuries to her head, including 4 different areas of lacerations that were caused from blunt trauma. She had a fracture to her left eye. Her left ear was crushed. Her head had clearly been stomped on. She was starved to death, essentially. That they could not tell exactly what killed her, and the way they had to identify her was through dental records. And she was identified as Shakira Spencer. The same evening, Sean actually was the first to break. I think the reason for this is because there was a lot of police in the area, and obviously, in this little suburb, a lot of people didn't see police that often. A lot of the neighbors were really nervous. And I think he was nervous because there's police and he's probably going to get caught. So he actually confessed to his uncle what he had done with Lisa and Oshana. Thankfully, his uncle called the police immediately. He didn't go, "Oh, wow, that's crazy. I'm not going to do anything." Thankfully, he did call the police and Sean was arrested that night. But he would deny that later in court. When they were all arrested, they took no accountability. They played stupid. Oshana wiped her phone. Sean tried to get rid of his. And I guess Lisa kept her phone with all of her messages and videos of what they had done. And obviously, the police could find all this. In fact, that they thought that they could get away with it, but also the fact that Lisa just kept it all on her phone, like, it's it's just so deplorable. Sean tried to play innocent. He really tried to go for the insanity plea. He tried to claim that he was like mentally disabled, that he just wasn't able to comprehend. But by the footage and the text messages, they could tell he knew what he was doing. And he was just really trying to be like, "Oh, please forgive me. I'm not as equally problematic as them because I'm, like, mentally delayed," which is like, no. A lot of them actually tried to do that where they're like, "Oh, we're not all equal in it." 'Cause, sometimes when there is, like, a trio, usually there might be one person who is the killer and, like, 2 people might just be bystanders. You're still all equally at fault, and the judge would make sure of it. It would take about 12 weeks for the trial and over 12 hours for the jury to come back with a verdict. Actually, the jurors never have to do jury duty ever again because the judge said it was too traumatic and that they were basically dismissed from jury duty for life. So they were sentenced for a minimum of 34 years, which means that they have to do 34 years first before they can even run another sentence to get parole. And the judge would actually say that they would never get out of prison, that they were in prison for life, that they were all at fault, that they did this in front of children, that they tried to hide her body, that they took a disabled woman and just tortured her. So thankfully, they're in prison for life. Shakira's family does have to live with this trauma of knowing what happened to Shakira. Shakira's son was devastated that he never got to say goodbye. He would have been around, I think, 12. They would have been like 11, 12 years old. One of them would say, "I never got to say goodbye to her or tell her that I loved her. These people let her die alone with her feeling she was unloved, as they had taken everybody away from her." He was heartbroken knowing that his mom died, thinking she was unloved. And that just breaks my heart, dude. Shakira's mom said that it ruined their family. She has nightmares hearing Shakira cry out for help. I just think that is so devastating, dude. And her son said he has the same thing. They have these nightmares. Oh my God, it's so sad. I just want to end this episode by remembering Shakira Spencer. She was this loving, kind, gentle spirit who loved her family. She loved her sons. Her family and her friends loved her. She was a great mom. And she just was this beautiful soul to be around. And no verdict will ever take away the horror that she went through. And I just truly send my heart out to her family and her friends. I can't imagine what that's like. But that is where we're at for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Again, I meant no harm to Shakira or her family or anyone affected by this case. I hope I explained this with a lot of empathy as I could. If you do have a case suggestion or topic, feel free to let us know in the comments, or we have a Google form. But again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.